Hello everyone, my name is Elite Trainer Kanto, and today is a very special day because today is the day we finally tackled that age-old question that has plagued the Pokemon community forever. What generation of Pokemon actually gets the most love from GameFreak and the Pokemon Company? I actually posed this question in our community tab earlier this week. On Tuesday, I asked you which of the first 4 generations you thought got the most love from GameFreak. On Wednesday, I posed that same question, but the choices were Gens 5 through 8. Then on Thursday, I took the top answer from both days and put them up head to head to see what you guys thought. So let's talk about it and see if you're right. Needless to say, there are a ton of different ways this question could be approached. Since the manga, anime, and card game tend to favor whatever the current generation is, I decided to stick largely with just the games. So let's lay out the criteria. Firstly, I decided to leave generations 8 and 9 out of this experiment because several categories just didn't apply to them and they were at a huge disadvantage. Now then, onto the process. I chose 9 categories and determined a rank for each one. Each generation will be given a score between 1 and 7 points, with 7 being the highest, based on their score. I then simply tallied up the score and ranked them from worst to best. So, here we go. Category 1, representation in Sword and Shield. By this I mean, how much of each generation's Pokemon show up in Sword and Shield with the DLC included. Of Generation 1's 151 Pokemon, 78% of them are available in Galar. Of the 100 Pokemon released in Generation 2, 54% are available in Sword and Shield. Generation 3 has a respectable 66%, Generation 4 has only 59%, Generations 5 through 7 all came in strong with 81%, 73%, and 87% respectively. So our top 3 winners for this category are Generation 7, then 5, then Generation 1. Category 2 is the exact same question, but with Scarlet and Violet. Of the original 151, 66% of them can be found in Paldea, Kitakami, or Blueberry. Of the 100 discovered in Generation 2, a whopping 82% of them can be found in Generation 9. Gen 3 came in at 57%, Gen 4 has a strong 80% showing, 56% of Unovan Pokemon are in Generation 9, and 66% of Generation 6 Dex shows up in some form or another in Paldea. And Generation 7 brings up the rear with a measly 53% of its Pokemon making an appearance in Paldea. Our top 3 winners for Category 2 are Generation 2, Generation 4, and a tie between Generation 1 and 6. For those of you who are wondering, Generation 8 would have scooped up 3rd place in this category as 75% of its Pokemon are in Generation 9. For Category 3, I initially wanted to check what percentage of each generation's Dex is available in Pokemon Go. However, I realized that all Pokemon discovered in Gens 1, 2, 3, and 5 have been available in Go at some point. And Generations 4 and 6 have 97 and 94% completion in Go. So that data is pretty much useless for this experiment. Instead, for Category 3, we're going to look at Pokemon movies. I did say at the top of this episode that I wanted to stay away from the anime. However, I thought it would be interesting to see what generation has the most representation on the big screen. So, Generation 1 has 2 movies, including the Mewtwo Strikes Back remake. Generation 2 and 3 both have 3 movies each. Generation 4 has the most with 5 movies. Generations 5 and 6 both have 4 movies each, and Generation 7 only has 2 movies. Pretty obvious here, but the big winner is Generation 4, with Gens 5 and 6 battling for 2nd place, and Generations 2 and 3 sharing the number 3 spot. Moving on to Category number 4. I wanted to look at the representation for each Dex, like we did with Categories 1 and 2, but for New Pokemon Snap. New Pokemon Snap was the longer-awaited sequel to Pokemon Snap on the N64, and so, with the models in New Pokemon Snap looking as good as they ever have, I wanted to see which generations got the most out of New Pokemon Snap. Generation 1 had 27% of its living Dex show up in the Lental region, while 39% of Generation 2's Pokemon show up. Generation 3 shows off 26% of its Dex, and Generation 4 shows off 32% of its Pokemon. Only 19% of Unova's Pokemon show up in Lental, while 26% of the Pokemon first discovered in Kalos can be photographed. And a whopping 38% of Alolan Pokemon are included. The big winners here are Generations 2, 7, and 4. With Pokemon Unite being a big part of Pokemon Worlds now, I think it's important to know what Pokemon are being represented in Unite. Generations 1 and 6 are tied with 11% of their respective Dexes showing up in Unite. Generations 2 and 7 are tied for 2nd place with 6% of their Dexes currently being available. Generation 4 has 4%, Gen 3 has 3%, and Gen 5 comes in last place with 2% in Unite. The next category features the new addition to Pokemon's mobile scene, Pokemon Sleep. I'm sure it's no surprise to you guys that 60 Gen 1 Pokemon can be met in Pokemon Sleep. But did you know that 42 Generation 2 Pokemon can also be found? Generation 3 has a surprising 18 Pokemon represented in Sleep. Generation 4 has 13 Pokemon. Generation 5 unfortunately has 0 Pokemon in Sleep. Meanwhile, Generation 6 has just 1 and Generation 7 actually has 2. The next category is probably what you all expected at the beginning of this video, Battle Gimmicks. I decided to lump Mega Evolution, Signature Z moves, and Gigantamax forms all into one category to see which generation gets the most preferential treatment. Gen 1 unsurprisingly comes in first place with 15 Megas, 5 Signature Z moves, and 12 G-Max forms, bringing it to a total of 32 Gimmicks. Despite not having any G-Max forms or Signature Z moves, Generation 3 actually comes in second place with 22 Mega Evolutions, including the Primal Reversions. Generation 7 lands itself in third place with 12 Signature Z moves and 1 G-Max form. Generation 2 narrowly lands itself in fourth place with 6 Megas, while Generation 4 falls just to fifth place with 5. Generation 6 only got 2 Mega forms during its own gimmick, and Generation 5 takes last place with just 1 G-Max form. For the final two categories, I wanted to see what percentages of Galar's and Paldea's Pokedexes are filled from each generation. I chose to exclude the DLCs because not everyone would have bought the DLCs. So I wanted to know what generation has the strongest representation if you bought base Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. Galar has 400 Pokemon in its base Pokedex. Of those 400 Pokemon, Unova's Pokemon makes up just under a quarter of Galar's Pokedex with 21%. Generation 1 takes second place with 13%. Generation 3 takes up 11% of Galar's Dex. Generation 4 takes just 10%. Generations 2, 6, and 7 are tied for last place with just 8% each. And for those of you who don't want to do the math, that adds up to just 73% of Galar's Pokedex, meaning that Unova is almost as strongly represented in base Sword and Shield as Galar is. Paldea likewise has 400 Pokemon in its base Pokedex, but it's a lot more evenly spread out. Gen 4 actually takes the top spot with 12% representation. Gen 1 takes second place with 11%, Gens 2 and 3 show off 10% each, Gen 5 has 8%, Gen 6 and 7 both have 7% each. And yes, I did the math. If we were counting Gen 8, it would come in fourth place with 9.5%. This adds up to roughly 75%, meaning that Gen 9 takes up roughly 25% of its own Pokedex. So with all of our categories now behind us, let's look at the results. Given that each category can earn a generation anywhere from 0 to 7 points, a total of 63 points would be a perfect score. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the results. Coming in dead last, I'm sorry to say, is Generation 5 with 33 out of a possible 63 points. Gen 5 got a lot of love from Sword and Shield developers, but not much love otherwise. Gen 6 just barely avoided coming in last place with 36 points. Kalos is my favorite region, but clearly GameFreak disagrees. Generation 3 takes up the number 5 spot with a final score of 42. Meanwhile, Generation 2 rides the middle of the road, sitting at a pretty 44 points. Now that we're down to the top 3, this is your last chance to leave your predictions in the comment section. Done? Good. Taking the bronze medal is Generation 4 with 45 out of a possible 63 points. Generation 7 was the most surprising, landing in second place with 47 points, which means what you probably all knew as soon as you clicked on this video, Generation 1 has consistently gotten the most love from GameFreak with a total of 52 out of a possible 63 points. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I mean, are any of us really surprised by this? I also took a look at things like most Pokemon cards made per gen or most regional variants, but honestly, that would have just extended Generation 1's lead. But who knows? Maybe if we revisit this in a couple of years, Generation 7 will get some more love from the Pokemon Company and take that overall number 1 spot. Let me know down in the comment section what generation you think deserves the most love. Oh, and don't forget that my moderator Seb is giving away shiny French Masuda Dittos over on our Discord server, so go check that out if you don't already have one. That's it from me, you guys. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I can't wait to talk to you all again soon. Peace.